Spring 1941. As the battle for the Atlantic rages on, a German U-boat crew is blown to the surface. When they try to scuttle their own submarine, a British commander recognizes a unique opportunity.
A sub-lieutenant and some sailors were actually allocated the task of trying to board the U-boat and seize anything they could.
If the Allies can act fast enough, they might capture the keys to victory. In World War II, a subsea weapon allows warriors to fight from beneath the waves. With cunning, force, and tenacity, their enemies strike back. Revolutionary, but still sometimes primitive, it's a desperate bid to change the course of war. Their stories are legend. September 3rd, 1939, 150 miles west of Scotland in the North Atlantic. Oberleutnant Srce, Fritz Julius Lemp, commander of U-boat U-30, peers through his periscope at an approaching vessel. Only hours earlier, the German Kriegsmarine, or Navy, radioed all U-boats to announce the outbreak of war, with orders to begin hostilities against British ships. They also receive a warning that auxiliary cruisers, modified British liners, or merchant ships armed by the British Navy could be in the area. As the opening day of the Second World War fades, Lemp strains to identify the ship in front of him.
It's behaving, in his opinion, like an auxiliary cruiser because it's zigzagging and it's blacked out. And he even imagines to have seen gun platforms.
In Lemp's mind, that is enough proof this is some kind of armed enemy ship. Fair game to be attacked without warning. With torpedoes ready, a little before 8 p.m., Lemp fires the first 2 U-boat torpedoes of World War II. The hydrophone operator monitors them by the sound of their propellers. One speeds towards the target. But there is a problem with the second. It should grow fainter, but instead is getting louder. Fearing that it will circle back and strike them, Lemp orders the U-boat deeper. It is a scenario they train for, even in peacetime.
The standard procedure is to dive below the depth where the torpedo would pass.
It could be tight. U-30 is more than 210 feet long, and as the bow angles down, the stern goes up. They must get the whole U-boat out of danger. They have no way to visually monitor the threat. Their only source of information is what the hydrophone operator can hear. When the noise finally fades away, the torpedo no longer poses a threat. Relieved, Lemp surfaces to investigate. With darkness falling, he moves in for a closer look. The first torpedo had struck the ship. But as Lemp surveys the crippled vessel, he realizes that something is wrong. They check the silhouette of the large ship against the Lloyd's Register of Vessels.
When he saw the scene of action, he realized that he was mistaken. It wasn't an auxiliary cruiser, it was a steamer with a lot of civilians in the water.
An intercepted radio transmission confirms his fears. It identifies the ship as the passenger liner SS Athenia, bound for Canada. Lemp has made a huge mistake. His orders were clear: sink only warships, troop ships, and enemy merchant vessels.
Hitler and the German government still hope for some kind of settlement agreement with Britain, and so they don't want to aggravate the British more than necessary.
Now, on the very first day of the war, Lemp has sunk a passenger vessel without warning. Comparisons are immediately made to the sinking of RMS Lusitania by a U-boat in World War I, an act that helped end American neutrality and brought the United States into the war against Imperial Germany. The exact scenario Hitler hoped to avoid with his strict instructions. Now the sinking of Athenia sets off a new political firestorm. Many of the 1,103 passengers aboard are Canadians, Americans, or European refugees escaping the war. 118 civilians are dead. Hitler and his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, vehemently denied German responsibility for the attack. The man responsible for Hitler's headache is 26-year-old Oberleutnant zur See Fritz Julius Lemp.
He was born as a son of an army officer in China before the First World War. He entered the Reichsmarine in 1931, and he went to the new created submarine arm in 1936.
He was assigned command of his own submarine, U-30, in 1938. Lemp recognizes the potential fallout from his error. He makes no radio report of the sinking and continues his patrol.
He has to keep it secret, and he decides to stick exactly to the submarine protocol for his future attacks.
11 days later, Lemp discovers another vessel. It is the British freighter SS Faned Head, bound for Belfast, carrying grain from Canada. He forces it to stop with a shot from his deck gun. When he ensures that the ship's crew is secure in lifeboats and well away, he dispatches a demolition crew with explosives to sink the British freighter.
This would save him precious torpedoes if they sink the ship by scuttling. And the other thing is they were searching for new and fresh rations, and they even transported it back to the submarine.
Lemp assumes they are safe. They detect no enemy ships nearby. And this far out at sea, they are beyond the reach of shore-based aircraft. But something has changed. With the heavy losses of merchant ships in the early days of the war, the British Navy dispatches a small armada to confront the threat.
On the 14th of September 1939, HMS Ark Royal was moving to the northwest approaches with a destroyer screen as part of a hunting group to seek out U-boats.
Commissioned in 1938, HMS Ark Royal is one of the first purpose-built aircraft carriers in the Royal Navy. Over 800 feet long with 9 decks, few ships in the British fleet are bigger. It is also one of the fastest, capable of over 30 knots. It can easily outpace a U-boat traveling on the surface. In addition to an 8-destroyer screen, Ark Royal's captain, Arthur John Power, can launch over 50 aircraft to extend his operating range by hundreds of miles in all directions. Power now has a chance to put the carrier group to the test. Ark Royal has picked up Faned Head's distress call from 180 miles away. And Power dispatches 3 aircraft and 3 destroyers in response. Unaware of the approaching danger, Lemp's men take their time bringing bread, fresh water, and other supplies from the merchant ship to the U-boat.
The crew is quite excited, having new rations. They transfer the canned food into the submarine, and it's an all-hands maneuver, which means that every crew member is participating in transporting the stuff. And due to the excitement, they may have lost their keenness on the watch.
Suddenly, a plane appears on the horizon. Lamp orders an emergency dive to escape the enemy aircraft closing in. September 14th, 1939, when German U-boat U-30 attacks a vessel called SS Fanedhead in the North Atlantic. Bombers, launched from a nearby British aircraft carrier, HMS Ark Royal, arrived to chase the submarine away.
The idea was to get the aircraft out at sea, vector the destroyers in on the submarines, either force it down or indeed destroy them. So it's a very rudimentary form of hunter-killer group.
Oberleutnant Sir Z. Fritz Julius Lemp dives so quickly, they close the hatch before one of his men on deck can make it back to safety. The British Skua bomber continues its approach.
When the Skua spots the submarine, it immediately attacks at low altitude. Its main armament is a 100-pound bomb. The idea is it hits the surface of the sea. This fuses it, and it goes off about 2 seconds later. Unfortunately, the bomb has a habit of bouncing on the surface. But the fuse is activated, so just at the time that it should be exploding alongside the submarine, it explodes under the aircraft that dropped it.
The explosion and the shrapnel take down the British airplane. Meanwhile, on board U-30, Lemp dives to hide while he formulates a plan.
When Lemp realized there was an aircraft, and especially a single-engine aircraft, there must have been an aircraft carrier around. And this means to Lemp further attacks.
Lemp creeps back to periscope depth to take a peek.
He may feel he is safe at this point.
When he raises the periscope, Lemp sees to his horror he's been towing around a target. The small boat they had used to bring back supplies from the Fanedhead.
It's like a camouflaged soldier in the woods with a red balloon.
Just then, another British aircraft closes in.
When the second Skua comes along, the pilot sees this dinghy entangled with the submarine, and he thinks, actually, it's probably the conning tower of the submarine.
The Skua pilot drops his bomb. The explosion rocks the submerged U-boat. But because the bomber attacks the dinghy trailing behind, U-30 escapes undamaged. However, if he wants to disappear again, Lemp must cut himself free of the boat. Despite the risk posed by the circling aircraft, he returns to the surface. Lemp's crew rushes onto the deck. They hack at the rope. As the British fighter bomber rakes them with machine gun fire. With the dinghy cut loose, Lemp's crew rushes back into the U-boat. And as U-30 begins to dive, a third Skua pilot spots the action and closes in. But like the first Skua, when he drops his bomb, it too bounces up. The explosion beneath engulfs the aircraft. Another Skua crashes into the ocean. But despite the ongoing attacks by enemy aircraft, the German U-boat cannot flee.
Because he had crew members aboard the Fanedhead and he wants to get them back.
Lemp's men had been sent aboard to scuttle the ship with explosives. When U-30 dived to escape the bombers, they were abandoned on deck. The stranded Germans watch in amazement as the planes go down and see the British pilots struggle in the water. German submariners jump in to help the airmen. They assist the pilots back to the Fannet Head and onto the relative safety of the deck. Meanwhile, U-30 attempts another approach to recover their crewmates. To avoid the attacking skuas, U-30 moves submerged toward Fannet Head.
His plan is to surface very close to the Fannet Head, to have a short time being surfaced, taking his crew members aboard.
Lemp noses in close to the side of the merchant vessel and starts to resurface. But limited to his periscope view, he has misjudged and rams his bow against the side of Fannet Head, which mangles his forward torpedo tubes. Leaving his men below to deal with the repercussions, Lemp moves to the bridge. When he emerges topside, he is met with frantic shouts from his crew aboard Fannet Head. Because Lemp has surfaced on the far side of the ship, he cannot see the British destroyer bearing down on them. September 14th, 1939. German U-boat U-30 surfaces next to the British merchant vessel, SS Fannet Head. Oberleutnant Zerzi Fritz Julius Lemp is determined to rescue his stranded crew members on board the freighter. From their position high on deck, they spot a British destroyer bearing down on them from the other side. For now, luckily for Lemp, Fannet Head also shields the U-boat from the destroyer's view and buys him some time to extricate his men. Lemp commands everyone on Fannet Head's deck into the water to be brought on board the U-boat. In addition to the German submariners, there are 2 British pilots rescued when their planes crashed. Lemp's crew jumps, but the British airmen hesitate.
Jump off!
Lemp cajoles them in English. He will not leave them behind.
They are valuable prisoners of war, and he is even responsible for them at that point. So he just gives them the option to jump into the water, to be rescued, or to stay aboard the Fannet Head when he will torpedo it.
Lemp proves persuasive. The pilots jump. As the waterlogged men are dragged onto the U-boat, another British aircraft appears and sprays U-30 with gunfire. U-boat crew member Adolf Schmidt is struck, but they manage to hurry everyone below. Lemp submerges to periscope depth, but he refuses to forfeit his prize, SS Fannet Head. With his bow torpedo tubes damaged, he turns U-30 to aim his undamaged stern tube at the freighter. He fires a single torpedo as he prepares to escape. The torpedo runs true, and Fannet Head begins to sink. But by now, the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal has dispatched a second wave of airplanes, British Swordfish bombers. The pilots spot U-30 beneath the surface and begin to attack. Lemp pushes the U-boat deeper. As the aerial bombs explode around them. He must get away, but it is difficult.
Underwater, U-boat is not as fast as surfaced, and if he's going quite fast with his electric batteries and electric engine, he's running out of electric fuel.
Lemp needs to use his limited battery power wisely. Alerted by the circling swordfish, the British ships close in.
Aircraft usually didn't have the power to destroy submarines until the middle of 1942, something like that. They could damage the submarines, but they weren't really submarine killers. It was the destroyers that did that.
As darkness falls, not one, but 3 British destroyers arrive to hunt U-30. Lemp tries to shake off his stalkers by diving even deeper. But a punishing barrage of depth charges follows him. British ships can track the U-boat underwater with a system they call ASDIC, a type of active sonar.
ASDIC uses sound waves in the water. It sends out a pulse, and this is reflected back from an underwater target, notably a submarine. So it goes ping and pong back.
By analyzing the difference between the ping and the return, they can predict where the enemy submarine might be and target the area with depth charges. For hours, the attacks continue. Even as Lemp tries to inch away. Suddenly, a charge explodes near the U-boat's hull. Without warning, U-30 begins to slide into the depths. September 1939. 3 British destroyers and their depth charges hunt a German submarine about 300 miles off the western coast of Scotland. Soon, a well-placed depth charge explodes off the stern of Oberleutnant Zerzi Fritz Julius Lemp's U-boat.
After a valve cracks in the engine room, the boat is getting full of water, and so the boat is outbalanced and going backwards.
The engineers race to fix the leak. But the extra weight drags U-30 deeper. Lemp continues to calmly give orders. His men form a bucket brigade to haul seawater flooding into the stern, forward to the bilges in the control room to be pumped out. But the U-boat continues to sink toward crushed depth.
As long as the sinking is uncontrollable, it feels like being a parachutist with your parachute not opening. And if it doesn't open, you just fall. He's out of control and hopes that everything will go the right way.
Finally, with the leak fixed and the bucket brigade exhausted, U-30 levels off. At 472 feet, Lemp and his crew have set a record in the U-boat arm. No German submariners have gone deeper and survived. At 2200 hours, U-30 surfaces into darkness. They have lost their pursuers. Lemp and his crew endured 6 hours of bombardment from ships and aircraft. But their submarine needs serious repairs.
U-30 is, for the future mission, nearly unserviceable. The torpedo tubes are damaged, the diving gauges are damaged, even the navigation system is damaged, so he had to rely on celestial navigation.
Besides a beat-up submarine, Lemp has another problem. What to do with his injured men and prisoners of war. The onboard medic patches everyone up as best he can. But he is not a surgeon. Crewman Adolf Schmidt has a severed artery in his forearm. And the British pilot suffered serious burns. They need proper treatment. Lemp sends a report to Commodore Karl Dönitz with details of the shootout battle with the HMS Ark Royal Carrier Group. And he also requests permission to divert to neutral Iceland for medical care. Dönitz agrees, but stipulates Lemp return directly home afterward for an accounting of his actions. Lemp has not acknowledged the sinking of SS Athenia, but Dönitz suspects he did it.
Dönitz orders Lemp straight home for debriefing. He simply wants to know what actually has happened and why Lemp decided to attack the Athenia.
Meanwhile, still hoping to keep the Americans out of the war, the Nazi regime continues to deny responsibility for the attack. As U-30 arrives in Iceland, Lemp clears the petty officers' quarters to speak with Schmidt alone. Knowing the political stakes, Lemp needs to ensure that Schmidt can remain silent about the Athenia incident and protect their diplomatic bombshell. Lemp forces Schmidt to sign a declaration to never speak about the events of September 3rd to anyone. Lemp then transfers the wounded man into Icelandic medical care and navigates the heavily damaged U-boat back to Germany. Because he directly violated Hitler's orders by sinking SS Athenia, Lemp must be uneasy about the fate which awaits him. September 1939. After sinking the passenger liner SS Athenia by mistake, Oberleutnant Sersi Fritz Julius Lemp is summoned by Commodore Karl Dönitz upon his return to Germany to explain his actions.
For Dönitz, on the one hand, there's this incident of sinking the Athenia. On the other hand, Lemp had a quite successful patrol. What adds to the problem is that the German propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, had openly denied any German responsibility for sinking of the Athenia.
Lemp cannot be publicly punished for actions German authorities continue to deny.
Lemp only received a dressing down in private by Dönitz, and afterwards the whole affair was more or less forgotten.
With German high command determined to sweep the Athenia affair under the rug.
Part of the cover-up of the Athenia incidents was forging the official log of the U-boat, and this is quite unique. This is actually the only case that a document like this was forged in the history of the Kriegsmarine.
Over the next year, U-30 sinks 17 ships and damages a British battleship. In August 1940, Lemp is awarded the prestigious Knight's Cross. Then, after 8 war patrols, Dönitz appoints him to a brand new Type 9 class U-boat, U-110. Despite recent setbacks, Dönitz hopes that the greater range, speed, and firepower of a Type 9 will reignite the happy times of the early U-boat campaign. On May 9th, 1941, Kapitän Leutnant Fritz Julius Lemp prowls near a large Allied convoy of 38 ships off the coast of Greenland. This far west, Lemp expects the escorts will have broken off and returned to Iceland, believing the convoy safe from U-boats. But after an earlier attack, the British 3rd Escort Group still surrounds convoy OB-318, which travels from Liverpool back to North America. Commander Addison Joe Baker Creswell directs defenses from on board the destroyer HMS Bulldog.
Baker Creswell was a pretty good escort group commander. He really was pioneering the improvements in escort organization and leadership, which had not been around at the beginning of the convoy operations the previous year.
Baker Creswell does not expect any further U-boat troubles. Still, to be safe, he divides up the 9 escort vessels in his preferred formation.
Baker Creswell has a mixed group of destroyers, corvettes, and anti-submarine trawlers, and he disposes them with 5 of his assets in front of the convoy,
1 on either side and 2 at the rear,
so that he can deal with an attack from any direction.
Aboard U-110, Lemp and his officers discuss the formidable escort. Some argue they should follow the convoy and wait until the escorts break off. But Lemp worries about running low of fuel and does not want to be drawn further west. He is confident they can make a successful attack. Just before noon on May 9th, Lemp fires 3 torpedoes 30 seconds apart. Two vessels are hit on the convoy's right side. Commander Baker Creswell watches the explosions with dismay, and then springs into action. He diverts 3 escorts to hunt U-110, while the convoy takes an emergency turn away from the attack. Lemp observes the first explosion with satisfaction. But a 4th torpedo remains stuck in the tube and throws U-110 out of trim. For a moment, Lemp is distracted. It proves costly. As he resumes his place at the periscope, he spots an Allied escort vessel closing in on their location and barely has time to react. Depth charges rain down around U-110 as Lemp dives deeper to evade his pursuers.
It's not the first time that he's attacked by depth charges, and up to this point, he always came away from it.
But as the attack continues, not even Lemp's calm demeanor can ease the severity of the situation. Damage reports pour in. The electric motors and rudders are out of commission. Batteries are damaged and release chlorine gas. Stored compressed air starts to leak, and just a single escaped bubble could give away their exact position to the destroyers above. But worst of all, if they can't stop the leak, without compressed air, U-110 will never return to the surface. As Lemp gets each report, he loses a function of his submarine and has fewer options for escape. Suddenly, the submarine loses trim again. This time, it starts to settle heavily by the stern. Any non-essential crew race to the bow to use their weight to rebalance the submarine and stop the free fall. But they continue to sink. Finally, with his pressurized air escaping too quickly, Lemp is left with no other option. He must blow the main ballast tanks and surface before it runs out. But before they can, the crew experiences a strange rocking motion. And then the telltale sensation of surfacing. On board the destroyer, HMS Bulldog, Baker Creswell sees the German U-boat surface. He prepares to ram and sink the submarine. Lemp rushes onto the bridge and emerges to a hail of enemy gunfire. He orders his men to abandon ship. As Germans spill out of the submarine and into the ocean, Baker Creswell recognizes an opportunity. Instead of sinking U-110, maybe he can capture it. May 9th, 1941. After his units have blown German U-boat U-110 to the surface with a depth charge attack, British commander A.J. Baker Creswell prepares to ram the submarine. As he watches the Germans abandon the sub, he recognizes the opportunity to capture instead of sink the U-boat. Baker Creswell decides it is worth a try and orders the engines in reverse, then mobilizes 9 men, led by 20-year-old Sub-Lieutenant David Baum. In the meantime, Captain Lieutenant Fritz Julius Lemp continues to evacuate the crew of U-110. And below deck, with no time to set the scuttling charges, his engineer opens the vents to allow seawater to rush in to sink the U-boat. When the engineer emerges from the hatch, confident U-110 will flood, Lemp follows his men into the cold waters of the North Atlantic. David Baum's boarding party arrives soon after. They approach the conning tower cautiously. Baum is surprised to find the hatch into the U-boat lowered.
You would expect all hatches to be open on a submarine that the German crew is trying to sink. It's not. Perhaps there are Germans left on board.
Baum readies himself and lifts open the hatch. He considers dropping in a grenade to clear any remaining Germans, but he does not want to further damage the U-boat, just as he prepares his descent. Baum requires both hands to go down the ladder.
He must have thought, if there are Germans down here, this is the time that they might surprise us.
When he makes it to the bottom, he begins to scan his surroundings.
Baum finds himself in a very unfamiliar environment. This is a German submarine. He doesn't know what its exact layout is. He doesn't know if the boat's about to be scuttled or not. Perhaps some charges might go off.
Baum and his men spread out. Outside, Lemp realizes with alarm that their U-boat continues to drift on the surface. Their attempt to sink U-110 has failed.
It was a second patrol on a Type 9 submarine, and it behaved different than a Type 7 submarine. It was quite larger and took more time to sink.
He calls out to his second-in-command that they return to ensure the destruction of the U-boat.
There was standing orders for the commanders of the submarine to take care to destroy all the secret material on board. LEM simply doesn't do that. And this is a failure that had the utmost strategic importance.
Aboard U-110, Baum's men worked to locate anything of interest. As the men collect documents, HMS Bulldog's telegraphist summons Baum to the radio room. He has found something unusual.
It seems that they hadn't been briefed on the Enigma machine, so therefore they just grab it because it seems interesting. And of course, it proved to be very interesting.
Baum has the telegraphist remove it from the table for transfer to their ship.
They also grab a lot of other signal material, and that proved to be even more interesting.
Meanwhile, Lemp struggles to reach U-110, but ultimately fails. He disappears beneath the waves of the North Atlantic. Baum and his men successfully transport the captured documents and equipment on board HMS Bulldog. But they cannot stabilize the U-boat, and it sinks mid-tow. Still, the raid is a resounding success. The strange wooden box holds the potential to shorten the war, an Enigma machine.
They got their hands on a running Enigma machine with everything set like the moment when it was used last, and the code books, so the British or the Allies were able to decipher a lot of German information.
The real key was in the codes.
What was important were the signal books. The signal books for the short signals, the Kurzsignalen, the signal books for up-to-date weather signals, and for the Offiziersignalen, the officer codes. And this significantly improved the capacity of Bletchley Park to decode naval messages quicker.
Lemp dies a hero in the eyes of the German people. But as in life, his story and reputation proves a roller coaster of ups and downs. When the truth of the capture came out in Germany decades later, veterans were outraged that his carelessness caused the deaths of so many submariners.
His reputation, of course, suffered from this failure. It was even more than a mistake. It was simply a failure to do what's... He simply failed to do his duty. Point. Full stop.
The battle for the control of Europe and the surrounding oceans would continue on. But the Allies gained the upper hand, and Nazi Germany misses the signs.
The Germans were always reluctant to believe that their codes had been broken. This was a great asset for the Allies throughout the war. If they'd known that an Enigma machine, an up-to-date naval one, and the codes it used had been captured, then they might have thought, more than they actually did, that their communications had been compromised.
And over time, this would prove to be the difference.